Good morning, or good evening, or afternoon, or whatever it is where you are right now. It's time to stop sitting on our butts and looking at other people's music and rather start writing some actual music for ourselves. So, this video we're gonna have a look at motifs. And a motifs is a small musical fragment and a building block that carries a lot of the thematic quality and identity of a composition. Now, one of the best examples in history of a motif in use is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, with four really characteristic notes, later known as the motif of fate. Take a minute and listen to the beginning of it and notice how the motif is presented and later developed through the next bars of music. It is actually used 13 times during only 19 bars, and the entire first movement of the symphony is built upon it. Now, let's just have a quick look at the motif itself. There are four notes: G, 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 and E flat. It is really that simple. However, it is probably one of the most important motifs in the history of classical music, and Beethoven stated that the motif was portraying fate knocking at the door. We can find examples of motifs across a whole lot of film scores and orchestral pieces, and a lot of times they are simpler than you think. Let's listen to a few motifs from well-known works and how they are used. Here is the main theme of the iconic score for Jurassic Park. This little fragment is one of the core building blocks of the entire theme, being used in a whole variety of ways. It can be heard used in several ways, both in background elements, smaller fragments, and as the core foundation for the iconic main melodies that make up the theme for the film. Here are two ways it's used. Some motifs are simple and some a bit more complex and longer. Let's have a quick look at another famous movie theme. This one is from E.T., also composed by John Williams. This motif is a little bit longer, but it still has the same effect of giving the piece a strong character. You can hear how the main motif is first presented, then moved around and changed throughout the piece. Similar uses of motifs as building blocks for entire themes can be seen in a wide range of songs, film scores, and classical pieces. If we go back to our earlier examples, we can see that small fragments are crucial building blocks in the melodies we have been looking at. Let's revisit Hogwarts once more. Here you can see how this little motif is the foundation for every phrase in the theme. And if we look closer, this happens in the Gladiator theme as well. And the use of central motifs are also very prominent in popular music, but usually referred to as hooks, which are really common in, for example, choruses, where they're usually repeated and developed. Now, why should you use motifs in your compositions? If you listen to a lot of great music throughout the times, a lot of the songs are built upon some sort of motif. The motifs give the pieces a core identity, and when using them throughout the piece, you maintain a characteristic quality while still developing the composition around it. It will have a feeling of coherence and connection, and using motifs is also a great way to get out of the writer's block. It might be really hard to just come up with a full melodic phrase on the go, but by using a small motif to begin with, you might quickly get new ideas and get going, especially when you learn how to develop these motifs into full melodies and themes. Later in this chapter, I will show you how you can write full melodies out of a single motif in no time, but first, let's have a look at how to write our first motifs. Writing a motif is actually fairly straightforward. As you've seen in examples like Jurassic Park and Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, The motifs can be extremely simple and still work amazingly well when developed and used in the right way. What to do with our motifs is something we will cover more in depth in the next few videos, but we will create a starting point to work with for now. We have already looked a bit at intervals and scales, which can be good starting points for creating good motifs. If you have an emotion or some kind of theme in mind, you can look at the different scales and intervals as guidelines. For example, if you want a slightly heroic fantasy adventure feel, you might play around with intervals like the perfect fifth, the Mixolydian scale, or anything along those lines. For a more sad and dark theme, however, playing around with minor scales, intervals like the minor sixth and such, can be a good starting point. Either way, the most important thing is to have fun, experiment, and not setting too many boundaries for yourself. Motifs can be based on melody, rhythm, or a combination of both. Some cues have a rhythm as foundation, where the rhythmical content of the motif is repeated, but the actual pitches and notes change during the piece. Others might have a specific interval or combination of notes as a core of the motif, but the rhythm and tempo it's presented in might vary and evolve. Then again, you have motifs that are a combination of both. Let's have a look at a few examples I made. First, let's look at a rhythmical one. This one is based on the following rhythmical motif. I have used the same rhythm over and over again, but just changed the actual notes that's playing. Let's have a little listen. This rhythmical motif is something I could further use in the track as well, in background elements, in counter melodies, and so on. Next, we have a motif based on an interval. I made a few in the interval video, so let's go back and visit the major 7th interval theme, and see how the entire theme is based on that interval alone. For this kind of theme and motif, I could choose to reuse this interval in a slower tempo, in woodwinds, in choirs, in background elements, and so on. It could be a characteristic core element of the theme. Finally, we have the theme from the Cantor video. This one was made using a combination of melody and rhythm, and the motif is moved around in a way that maintains the characteristic melody movement and rhythmical pattern. Let's have a listen. I hope these examples give you a little idea regarding how you can come up with your own motifs. Play around and have fun, and don't overthink with regards to what we will make from them. This is something we're going to look at in detail in the coming videos. For now, come up with one or more motifs that you'd like to explore further, and we're good to go. I'll see you in the next video.